And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody, to the only podcast on the internet whose obvious hand bruises are not related to chronic venous deficiency.
Yes. So, I'm Dr. Christopher Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Patrick Armshaw.
And we are doctors.
But not doctors.
Welcome back, and it's another fun episode, and we are trying our best to keep up with the nonsense that's flowing through the world. And one of the best ways to do that is to start off with a question, and it's an easy, simple question. All right. I don't even know how political it is, because we like to talk about politics in this podcast and all that.
I mean, that is what we are doctors in, is the thing.
Doctors in, yes, yeah. not an underwater basket weaving, but political science.
Which is why we can't actually speak to Trump's chronic venous deficiency. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Who knows?
Something else that I'd like you to speak on, having no expertise in this, is Trump alive?
That's a question. That's an actual question.
How is this a question?
Yeah.
How is this a question mark in 2025? It's not 19. It's not. He's not Woodrow Wilson.
No, that's
Trump
true.
Isn't running the country.
That's true. I mean, but that's the thing. So he hasn't been seen in public since Tuesday, and it is currently Labor Day weekend in the United States. Now, for those of you who are not Americans and therefore part of the greatest country on earth, Labor Day is what we do instead of May Day, because May Day, you see, is socialist and therefore evil and wrong.
That's right.
So America has Labor Day, which is in September instead of on the 1st of May, to celebrate the American worker and do nothing for him or her other than, have a day off on a Monday, which is pretty great, actually.
Barbecues, man. You forgot about the barbecues.
Oh, you got to have a barbecue. That's absolutely true.
And it's the last big summer holiday. It's the last big thing you do.
True.
Labor Day marks the end of summer.
Yeah. So, it's kind of an interesting moment, right? Although, interestingly enough, summer doesn't end officially until the 21st of September.
Yeah, of course.
September is a summer month.
Half of it is, at least.
I mean, 21 out of 31, that's 2/3 of it, my friend.
Oh, over half.
Seriously. And yet.
September only has 30 days, by the way, Patrick. It only has 30. September has 30 days.
Well, okay, 21 out of 30. 30. But that is exception. That's a little bit more than 2/3. So I think my point, rather than simply standing, is in fact strengthened.
Oh no, it's emboldened by my adjustment of the time.
Nay, Chris, embiggened.
It has been embiggened. So that's the big question floating around, certain circles. Now the right wing is, joking and laughing because they're like, how could the left think that the president's dead? I will take you back exactly 1 year. To when
are we hopping in the Wayback Machine, Chris?
And we're hopping in the Wayback Machine, getting your DeLorean and your TARDISes, folks. Because they're taking you right back to 2024. 2024, when anytime Joe Biden sneezed, walked, and turned his head to the left or right, they're like, that's a double. He's dead. He's not really there. He's all being controlled by puppets and puppeteers from Disney.
Well, now, the funny thing is, Chris, that, admittedly, the right wing got a bit over its skis when Biden was president and, believed in absurd conspiracy theories involving body doubles and, things of that nature. The second that Trump got reelected, the right wing completely forgave all conspiracy theories. And now they are the reasonable ones, I think you'll find. Yes. So it's the left that's crazy by saying things like the president is overstepping his constitutional authority and effectively turning America into a competitive authoritarianism rather than a democracy. That's just crazy talk, Chris.
That is crazy talk. We need to calm down. I mean, it is now the left that is, the height of intrigue and
exactly. And I've heard that the left believes in vaccines, Chris.
The left does believe in vaccines, which is weird because America no longer believes in vaccines.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been such a messed up week. Now, we've been gone for about a week and a half now. We weren't able to do it because the bank holiday weekend in the UK was last weekend. And I was busy. And very, very, very busy. But we're back now. And it's just, I find it to be actually quite ridiculous, but also what the White House has done to try to convince us that he is still there, none of it's working. So they didn't put out anything up until I think yesterday, where a picture came out of him playing golf in Virginia.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay then.
But I've only heard rumored that picture was actually from June.
Oh, Well, that would be problematic if that were true. If that ends up being the case, Chris, if it ends up that they have put out a photo of the president playing golf from June rather than the very end of August, that would be pretty much an absolute indication that something horrific has happened that they don't want anyone to know about. And I don't know that that is the case. I do know that apparently Donald Trump has no official duties scheduled in his calendar for the Labor Day weekend. No golfing is scheduled.
Yeah. So also something that we also need to remember is that during the election campaign last year, he disappeared for like 3 weeks. Remember?
There was a bit of a disappearance, wasn't there?
There was a huge gap where he just wasn't on the campaign trail, and nobody really talked about it. Again, if Biden was to, when he tripped up the stairs, that clip is still played on Seth Meyers.
Obviously, because
he literally disappeared, and just left the campaign trail for weeks.
It's because he was doing so well, Chris. It's because he was so dominant that he felt that he had to give Joe Biden and Kamala Harris a chance by dropping out of the race for 3 weeks. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. And you're right. There's a massive double standard here, which is that any indication of age by Joe Biden was treated as a major story for weeks.
Yeah.
And any similar or even greater indication of age by Donald Trump is swept under the carpet, not discussed, and almost considered like it's absurd to even think that there could be a question about the president's health, regardless of massively swollen ankles, huge hand bruises, and various disappearances.
Yeah, various disappearances. He has, and people have been bringing this up. He has the same hand bruises that the Queen had just before she died.
That is not great from his standpoint.
No, I mean, and usually those come from IV needles, I think. Again, not that kind of doctor.
Oh, yes, I see what you mean, actually. That would make sense.
Yeah.
What are they pumping into him, Chris?
Well, who knows, man? Who knows? Yeah. So
right. We're not that kind of doctors anyway.
We're not that kind of doctors. All of this is just conjecture. I'm sure he'll pop up in the next few days. But I mean, obviously, once again, the White House has completely bungled an opportunity to quiet all conspiracy theorists about what's going on with the health of the president by not putting out a video, not having him walk outside, not having him do and also a picture that they put out. Either the day before yesterday or the day before yesterday, it was in black and white.
What?
Like the White House Twitter account put out this picture of Trump in black and white in the Oval Office. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense because he's famously orange. So if we can't see him orange,
it could be a body double if that man is not orange. How are we to tell?
But you're surrounded by, and it also, you have to remember that the White House press corps that's allowed inside the Oval Office, they're all friendlies. There's not a single, antagonist voice in there. It's just it's lackey after lackey after lackey. What's her face? Marjorie Taylor Greene's husband is one of the guy who went after Zelensky.
Right, the guy attacked Zelensky for not wearing a suit because
he's a shill.
Yeah, well, basically yes.
And so it's not like people in there wouldn't do their best to make him look the best. Mm-hmm. So if they can't even prop him up in front of a friendly crowd.
That is a really good point, actually, because if he were available for such things, like if he wasn't, I don't know, if he could work in like a quick 10-minute meet and greet with friendly press in the Oval Office, which is like a few feet away from his bedroom, so not that hard to get to. Like the commute is not a difficulty when you are the president of the United States, right?
Yeah.
So
you work in your house.
Yeah, that's true. Being president is the ultimate work from home experience, isn't it?
Yeah. You just go down to your office, the Oval Office, and then you roll over to I think the suites are on the third floor or something. Mm-hmm. So, or like the bedrooms and whatever on the third floor. So it's like, this is I'm sure it all smooth itself out quickly because obviously in a few weeks we'll have the UN General Assembly where he has to turn up.
Right.
He has to be there.
Now that'll be interesting. Speaking actually of the UN General Assembly meeting, the United States has decided to revoke the entry visas for members of the Palestinian Authority who are representatives from the Palestinian Authority who are members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Now this is pretty much unprecedented. The whole point of the United Nations is that all nations and observer groups have the right to go because that's what allows the UN building to be located in the United States. It's neutral ground. That's the whole point of it, right? So for the Trump administration to basically say, and we're just going to decide who gets to go to the UN and who doesn't, is effectively them saying, yeah, the UN can no longer be located in the United States.
Exactly.
Which, so that's one more institution that is currently being undermined.
Yeah, no, that's what America and the UN haven't had the best relationship for a while. I mean, but the fact that they're just saying we're going to let the UN know who can and cannot come to the UN would be, all right, I know we have this massive building there, but we can sell it and we can move to Switzerland or something.
Yeah,
which is in a better position globally.
Honestly, a little bit easier for everyone to get to in the Eurasian landmass is to fly to Switzerland. Also, the skiing is better than it is in New York City, I have heard.
Very few mountains in the Central Park. So
exactly.
So as we turn away from that for just a second, let's talk about stuff that's a bit closer to home.
Let's cross the Atlantic. Let's fly on back to Old Blighty. How's everything going here, Chris?
Oh, yeah, everything. Again, it's the summer. So as we keep on saying that there's not really any politics happening, but what politics does happen gets magnified 1,000%. And the best person to get politics to be magnified 1,000% is one Nigel Farage. And
he has real form when it comes to seizing control of the political narrative, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, but it's kind of like, if somebody takes a dump in the middle of the street, you're going to pay attention if somebody's doing that, because you're at least going to ask a few questions. One, why? Two, I'm going to walk away from that person. Hope. Yeah. But a lot of people walk towards. A lot of people walk towards because they at least
people like spectacle. People like spectacle. And
it's a spectacle, isn't it? And so a couple of things have happened over the past couple of weeks, but we'll talk about two things. Asylum Hotels, which is a concept we'll cover in a second. And then the second one briefly is that Nigel Farage wants to copy Donald Trump's deportation plan. So first off, let's talk about Asylum Hotels. And here's a general overview. When an asylum seeker crosses the channel, right? So in the United Kingdom, as with all of Europe, asylum seekers from the Middle East, from Afghanistan, from war-torn countries, from Africa, the continent of Africa, they walk. And I want to stress this. They walk tens of thousands of miles. They walk from, maybe some Central African nation. They'll walk from Afghanistan. They'll walk from Syria. They'll walk from Iran. And then they'll get to the Mediterranean Sea, and then they will risk their lives on boats. And these people are, they're women, children, men, people who are trying to find a better life. They are people who are often being persecuted in their country. If they stay there, they're going to die or be conscripted into the army. And I think the unifying theory here is that they all speak English or have a general ability to speak English or have family in the UK. Because you really want to go to a place where your family is.
That's true. You want to go somewhere where you have some kind of connection, some kind of social network, where there's, because one of the worst things to do as a human being is to be completely isolated inside of a larger community, because then you really are just at the mercy of you rely on the kindness of strangers,
And unless you're coming in with hundreds of millions of dollars and millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars at your disposal, you have to start from scratch, which is basically being homeless.
Absolutely.
So eventually, a lot of these people, because some of them go to Germany, some of them go to France, some of them go, and other countries in Europe take a lot more than the UK does. These people make their way over to the coast of France, over in Calais, and they cross the English Channel. This is the subject of a massive political debate in the United Kingdom about what they call small boats. And so they get into these tiny little boats. They go across the English Channel. Some of them die and they drown. And then those who arrive are then basically need to get processed. And the UK has had a horrible time processing asylum applications because they come in and they claim asylum. And then it's up to the country where you claim asylum to figure out if you're supposed to have asylum. So let's say that you're like a gay person who comes from a country where being gay is illegal. Right. And you have to say, I'm gay and I need to claim asylum or else I'm going to be fucked. I'm going to be murdered.
Yeah. If I go back, my life will be in danger.
Right. And then the country theoretically says, OK, that's fair. You can claim asylum here. But that process takes a very long time, potentially years and years and years. And because it's so political, people like Nigel Farage say all these people coming over are not asylum seekers. They're just 6 foot tall, glistening men who are trying to, run around the streets and take over all, and assault anyone who they could find. So the way that they're dealing with all these asylum claimers and to figure out if they are asylums, like actual asylum seekers, is to put them into effectively unused hotels. And they're unused hotels across the United Kingdom. And these hotels is the subject of the political backlash currently. And so you have all these asylum seekers kind of in these various hotels. And there's now a mental idea inside of some people in the UK that these hotels are all like the Ritz. They're all like, they're getting served room service. They're all getting caviar. They're all getting foot massages. And so people are like, we have a cost of living crisis and we're throwing hundreds of millions or tens of millions of pounds at these hotels where people are, they have butlers and they're eating, foie gras all day. And, they're getting to buy all these expensive clothes and they get to go on tours and they have planes and helicopters. While I'm struggling, these guys have jetpacks, Patrick, jetpacks.
Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know that we had the jetpack technology, but good to know. Okay, so it's worth I think disentangling this snarl of a situation. I think there's a few questions that people might legitimately have about this. Like, number one, why is it that asylum seekers would have to be housed in hotels in the first place? And the answer to that, of course, is that if you are claiming asylum, but you have not yet been granted asylum, then you do not have the right to work inside of the United Kingdom. And that, of course, is because in order to have the right to work, you need to have a settled legal status. Being granted asylum means, generally speaking, getting the right to work. And if you have the right to work, you can earn money, you can support yourself, and you therefore are not a burden on the taxpayer, theoretically, especially if you can earn enough to sort of like not have to rely on universal credit. But if you haven't yet been judged to be someone who legitimately can claim asylum, if you haven't been granted that status, then you're not allowed to work, which means that you cannot pay your own way, which means that basically, in order to not have you starve to death while your claim is being considered, the taxpayer does have to basically pay for you, your lodging, your food, things of this nature. This is not a thing where if you don't have asylum status, you simply can't work, and therefore that by necessity means that the state has to step in. So that's sort of why we would see, number one, asylum seekers being sort of housed by the government, but why in hotels specifically? And that has to do with the fact that the conservative government was sort of notoriously bad at paying for the bureaucracy necessary to make the state operate. Part of this had to do, I think, with a profoundly misguided shift towards austerity in 2010. This ended up really gutting Britain's state apparatus, which meant that it couldn't operate very efficiently, which meant that you had a huge increase in waiting times for things like universal credit, for things like criminal courts to actually operate. So huge lag times in terms of between someone getting arrested and someone actually facing a trial, and therefore witnesses having to wait potentially years for the case to come up for them to be able to give their evidence. And one of the other things that happened was a real backlog developed in dealing with asylum seekers for actually investigating their claims, making a determination, and either saying, oh yeah, you are legitimately someone who can claim asylum. You have asylum, we are granting you asylum, that's happening. Or, well, no, actually, you are not legitimately claiming asylum. We think you're here for a different reason, and therefore you have no right to be here, and therefore we're sending you back. So the funny thing is, right, it's that it's precisely the fact that the government has spent so little money on actually processing refugees that it must spend so much money on housing people claiming asylum. It's a real kick in the head, basically, for just sort of like how badly an attempt to save money can end up costing way more. It was like Doge avant la lettre. you know?
I mean, and so this has kind of all come to a head where recently in one of the hotels, the Bell Hotel in Epping, which is near London. Let me check my geography because that's the one thing I'm really bad at is English geography. But
I understand London is in the southeast.
London is next to a river, is what I understand.
Yes.
And that river goes out to the Channel, which is, where the issue is.
And the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone. So, yeah.
So there was basically a person in one of these hotels who was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage girl. And the man denies the charge, but it kind of finally lit the fuse that had already been lit a couple times but put out. Basically, the push from the far right, and I mean it's pretty clear that it's always from the far right, is that you're having all these brown men in these hotels, and they're a threat to our youngest and our dearest, and and all that. So the Epping Council, the Council for Epping, which is called the Epping Council, they sued the government to shut down that hotel. And I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the courts sided with the council to shut down the hotel, which huge celebration, not protests or riots, but huge celebrations outside of that hotel as the courts forced them to basically said you have to empty out this hotel, which creates an even bigger problem. Where do you put them now?
Well, that's the thing. And in fact, a much bigger problem than that, even because the ruling was dependent upon the idea that the council the hotel did not have hostel status, which is what it would need in order to act in its, act in the capacity of long-term temporary housing, basically, right? So because they didn't have that hostel status, therefore the council was able to say, well, they're operating outside of the law. For that reason, we have to end it. And the government was pretty bad at actually following this case. Apparently, they finally intervened and actually provided a proper defense. I think a few hours before the deadline. It was not covering itself in glory. Let us say.
Once again, labor comes to the rescue with the
So kind of a problem. But what's interesting about that ruling is that the judge basically refused to take into consideration the government's points because it was getting in so late. It refused to take into consideration any sort of policy outcomes of this. It refused to consider, okay, well, if this ruling goes this way, what are other councils going to do? And if that happens, what's going to happen to the entire refugee housing issue? And also, what happens to the refugees themselves? Like the judge did not take into consideration whether or not this would mean that, well, these people are now all homeless on the street, which the government has a legal responsibility not to allow. The government has a legal responsibility not to allow people to be homeless in general, especially those that are under its care. So this was a bad ruling. It was one that you could only really reach as the judge if you're just not willing to take into consideration things that you really have to take into consideration. I'm not saying that therefore the result was wrong, although I do believe it was wrong, but the way in which that result was reached by the local judge, that was, or the judge of first instance, that I think was pretty much indefensible. So I'm not surprised the Court of Appeals ended up allowing the appeal and reversing that decision.
So let's back up. So the government appealed that decision because of all the things that Patrick said, and the government won the appeal. So that now falls a full circle around what Patrick said. And again, so now these people can stay, but it doesn't mean that people won't try again to try to get these hotels removed from their council. It's the ultimate NIMBYism, right? Because it's just this idea that there's a bunch of asylum seekers or immigrants or whatever you want to call them. But we always have to go back to this one point when it comes to immigration in the UK. Nobody has a problem with Ukrainian immigrants. Ukrainian refugees. There were Ukrainian refugees all across the UK, and Hong Kongers who had a special immigration channel created just for them. I mean, the biggest catch-22, I think, in this immigration scenario in which we're living is, what if a Ukrainian is in one of these small boats? What if, for whatever reason, a Ukrainian winds up in Calais and has to take one of these small boats over, and they wind up in one of these hotels?
Right.
All of a sudden, is a Ukrainian just as threatening as an Afghani or an Iranian or an Iraqi or a Syrian or whoever, right? Because the whole idea is that, these people would not claim to be racist. They claim not to be They claim to be all about public safety and, but everything they say
is purely about crime and what
looking out for your communities, looking out for your young women, looking out for, and the claim is always that, people are coming over here who are not, they've not been socialized in the United Kingdom. I've listened to a couple of these guys today, but ultimately, this is going to get worse and worse and worse, which then leads us to our next point, which is Nigel Farage's deportation plan.
Right. So that's
because these two things are merged.
Well, of course they are. I mean, all of this is sort of an indication of the special relationship being turning a little bit toxic. Whereas, instead of us, thinking about Britain and the United States having a special relationship, that means we're natural allies. That means that clearly, we should be, we would expect a cross-pollination of culture, British music, British movies coming to the United States and becoming hugely popular, American, music and movies obviously coming to Britain being popular. Like, instead of that, what we're seeing is this transmission of political insanity from the United States to Great Britain, and Nigel Farage is the vector for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, American political advisors have been all over British politics for years. Not including myself. I'm not one of them. I am not. Like, you have to have been established before I started working for the S&P. I was working in the Florida Senate, so I wasn't like some lobbyist or whatever who was making tons and tons of money, which is why I moved to the UK to make almost no money.
Hooray! Look at you coming here, taking our jobs,
paying taxes,
pay nothing
to get paid parliamentary wages. Right. But we've had American advisors over for years, and this is a direct result of that. And obviously, Farage and the rest of whatever the name of the party he's running right now is that what they're doing in America is working and winning. And at the very least, it is popular with the right kinds of demographics to keep the movement going. And so his plan is basically just like a combination of all the other get people out quick plans. So let's go back to small boats. So right now, when you come over in a small boat, you come into the country not through a normal port, which is the best way to put it. You haven't landed at an airport. You haven't come in at a seaport. You haven't driven across on a ferry. You've come across in a small rib and you've risked your life. And now you're here because that's the only way you can really do it. Because you can't, for whatever reason, you can't get on a plane. So you get on the dry land, and then you get scooped up by the Home Office or the police. They put you into various holding areas, and then eventually you might go to a hotel. Farage's plan is to, as soon as you touch the ground, you're immediately deported. So the next stop is onto a plane, and then on to a third country, and those third countries can be wherever they think you're from, including Afghanistan. Which means he's willing to do a deal with the Taliban to send people. And the Taliban's like, we are super happy to accept people who've run away from us.
Yes, we have plans for them, say the Taliban.
Which is the entire point of asylum. It's the whole reason that asylum exists. Is that when you send these people back who are like, I'm going to get murdered if I stay in my country, just like, well, I don't want you here because I don't want you walking on our high streets. We'll send you back to Afghanistan to get hacked and slashed. I'm like, this is, and he even said that he would send over women and children as well, because
of course he would say that.
Yeah,
I mean, his whole political brand is, I'm going to be a monster, and people are going to be just refreshed to see someone who's a literal monster instead of someone who pretends not to be a monster. I'll just be a monster.
Now, to be fair, he did pull back on that one the very next day.
Oh, was that too monstrous? Was that a bit too much of the monster?
I think he showed too much of the face underneath the human mask.
Yeah, that's always the problem with lizard people, right? Is that like the mask slips a little bit, and then people see the reptile skin. So because
not as fun.
As we all know, I'm a huge believer in the theories of Mr. David Icke's But only when it comes to Nigel Farage. She's the only lizard person.
The only lizard person that you know of. Not Oprah Winfrey. Not Barack Obama.
No, she's not a lizard person. No, she's just.
When did they get to you, Patrick? When did they get to you? When did they get to you?
What can I say? I'm totally bought and paid for by Big Lizard. So
Oh man. So yeah. So it's. And there's one final part about that I want to talk about. We've talked about it before, but we need to consistently talk about it. The way that he's going to do this deportation scheme, because right now it's massively illegal. So the only way to really do it is to get out of the European Convention on Human Rights.
I was going to say that it did seem like that entire plan would be a massive violation of current law. Yeah. And the European Convention on Human Rights, that is part of British law. It has been brought in under the
Human Rights Act.
Human Rights Act, exactly. And so, and what's interesting about that act is that it basically instructs the judiciary that any law, even including those that come after it, that deal with anything that falls within the Human Rights Act, is to be understood and is to be sort of interpreted in light of the Human Rights Act. So it's a very interesting parliamentary law that you don't normally get. Normally, when Parliament passes a law, that law, of course, is binding, and it supersedes any contravening law that was passed before it, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, any new legislation could be passed by Parliament, and if it contravenes what came before, then the interpretation is, well, now that takes precedent, right? So if Parliament passed a law saying everyone must wear a fish on their sleeve on every alternate Tuesday, then we sort of have to do that. And then if they passed a law that said, oh, no, that's a terrible idea, we're not doing that anymore, then that law would cease to be.
Yeah.
So with the Human Rights Act, what's really interesting is that the law itself instructs the judiciary and basically says, not any law, until this law is repealed specifically and explicitly, any law that appears to contravene this must be interpreted to be consonant with the Human Rights Act, with the European Convention on Human Rights. It's a very clever way of dealing with parliamentary sovereignty without removing Parliament's ability to, at any time, get rid of it. It's just that Parliament would have to be explicit and say, we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act. We think you have too many human rights, so we're going to take them away now.
And that's the problem, is that when you mess with the Human Rights Act, you're not just going to mess with the part that protects immigrants, right? Once you crack it open, and the thing about the Human Rights Act of 98, it's just like any other bill in Parliament or act in Parliament. It can be overturned by a 50+1 majority of whoever is building that day. So there's nothing stopping Farage, if he was to be the prime minister, from saying, all right, so the Human Rights Act is a huge problem. It's creating all this, allowing immigrants to walk our streets with impunity. So we're going to get rid of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Hang on. Why would you get rid of freedom of expression, which is part of the Human Rights Act, or part of the ECHR? And he says, feel like it. And there's not much you could do about it, because
if you've got a working parliamentary majority, you can pass what laws you like. The only things that would stand in its way, the only real obstacle, say, you would have as a prime minister in the British system is, number one, the House of Lords can delay things.
As long as it was in your manifesto, they can delay it for a year or two.
Exactly, right. If it's not in your manifesto, I think that there is like it's more possible to block.
No, that prohibition doesn't exist if it's not in the manifesto.
Right, exactly.
So basically, anything that you promised the people in your election pledge, cannot be halted by the House of Lords.
Which would mean that in order to pull this off, right, Farage would have to run on, I'm going to get rid of the Human Rights Act.
And guess what, folks?
Yeah, well, that's basically what he's running on, isn't it? So.
It's what a lot of parties have run on. The Tories have run on that. The Farage has run on that in the past. I've checked.
Yeah.
So it's in their manifestos. So it's just that they've never.
That's not ideal.
There.
That's not great.
No, it's not. And
so if they could get that majority, the House of Lords would be able to delay for I think a year, and
a year or two,
possibly two. Yeah, and then. At that point, the House of Commons would prevail, and then the only potential block would be the Crown, and of course the monarch has not refused the royal assent since Queen
1706.
Anne? Yeah, 1706, Queen Anne. So that was quite some time ago. And at that point, the only possible thing that you could do would be to have the courts rule and say there is a problem with how this legislation was drafted, so it doesn't mean what you thought it meant in Parliament. This is what you ended up actually saying in your legislation. But careful drafting of legislation would prevent that from being a problem. So yeah, it's not ideal, because if you did have Prime Minister Farage with a working parliamentary majority, he would be kind of unbounded.
Yep. The only thing holding back any prime minister at that point is just decency,
which Nigel Farage is not known to possess in abundance.
Well, why would you have decency when you have ultimate control, or the crown? Like the actual monarch having to step in, which would be a huge constitutional crisis, and I mean,
it would be the constitutional crisis.
I mean, we're talking about 300 plus years now of this understanding that the monarch will advise, the monarch will, you'll talk to the monarch, but the monarch will do what the monarch is told. And you will sign this bill, which, you will claim sorts out all immigration, and there'll be no more brown immigration to the UK, only Ukrainians and Swedes.
Right.
But also in exchange for that, most of your rights go away. So it is a very it's a precarious time here in the UK, but that we're in the kind of the preliminary, we're in the drafting stages of that. Because we don't have an election coming up too soon. Let's take a little break and we'll talk about how the United States is definitely in the first stages of that.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. So give us a second and we'll be right back. And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time to talk about America.
Woo!
Pew, pew, pew. Things are just going great in the land of the free. I mean...
And sorry, I want to get in here real quick. I want to say that this half of the broadcast is brought to you by the Florida State University, who just beat Alabama yesterday.
Oh, congratulations,
FSU. Unranked FSU beats Alabama number 8. They storm the field. Go Noles.
Yeah. All right.
Eat it. All right. So let's hope the rest of the season works out that well.
Fingers crossed, Chris.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right. That's a little bit of levity because the rest of this is terrifying.
Yeah, it's going to get dark, kids. It's going to get dark. So buckle up.
Get out your flashlights.
Indeed.
Of freedom. So in this half, we need to talk about two things. I think.
All right.
First off, I want to talk about the Fed. If we have any time for that. And the second thing is about the siege of Chicago. I think we can take a few minutes first and talk about how the authoritarian plans of Trump 2025 or Project 2025, they're the same thing, are clearly coming to fruition, but they're running into the opposite of what happens in the UK. As you were talking about in the last section, once the prime minister is in power and they have a majority, it is a runaway train, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing holding it back is something literally called the good chap theory, where the right sort of person is in the right sort of place, and they're going to do the right sort of thing because that's the done thing.
Exactly. Because someone who broke those conventions would never rise to a position of power in the first place.
Of course.
And then Boris Johnson got in, and that was the end of the good chap theory, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're just kind of like hoping we don't get the bad chap in power.
And
so
when Boris Johnson isn't the bad chap, think about that.
Yeah, that's a thought.
In the United States, we have a constitution. We have huge firewalls that, first off, have to be put up. So the Congress is one of them, but the Republicans laid on their soft bellies, turned them over, and exposed them to Trump as they tickled his soft undercarriage as he walks by.
Yeah.
But one of the things that America does well is to separate the politics of the government from the setting of interest rates, and so that the Federal Reserve Bank is an independent organization that effectively is in charge of our economy.
Exactly. If I can give a quick sort of primer on the Fed and its role and why it's meant to be independent in the first place.
Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve, this gets created after this horrible depression in the 1910s, where basically the only thing that prevented America from slipping into the Great Depression, but like 20 years early, was basically the role of, like, I think it was J.P. Morgan and some of the other incredibly wealthy people on Wall Street actively trying to get everyone in the same room who had just a massive amount of money and getting them to agree not to sell all their stocks at once, basically.
Yeah.
And it was a real wake-up call to the country, because everyone realized, oh my God, the economy is way too big and way too complex. And at this point, if we don't start having some basic controls on how things are done, things could collapse altogether. So the Federal Reserve, it exists to act as a lender of last resort to banks to prevent bank runs, which is really good because you don't want those. Those are no good at all.
Yeah, banks need money.
Exactly. And, if everyone asks for their money back at the same time, the bank cannot possibly have enough to make sure that everyone gets their money back, which means that the bank collapses, which means everyone loses their money, which means other people try to pull their money out of other banks because now they're worried about money, and dominoes all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big things the Fed does. Another big thing the Fed does is what Chris mentioned, is it controls short-term interest rates. So basically, it lends money to banks at a certain interest rate. Banks then turn around and lend that money out to other borrowers at a higher interest rate. That's how banks make their money. But obviously, the higher the interest rate the Fed charges, the higher the interest rate banks have to lend in order to make a profit. The higher interest rates go up in the rest of the economy, the more expensive it is to borrow, the less money you've got to be able to spend on consumer goods, to be able to spend on investment in companies. So effectively, what that means is when the Fed raises interest rates, the economy slows down, people get out of work, wages grow more slowly, things get sucky, but prices remain stable.
Yeah.
When the Fed drops interest rates, the economy picks up, more people get hired, more investment happens, more money is being created, hooray.
Yay.
But at a certain level, you have too much money sloshing around in the system, and that causes inflation. And you don't want that, right?
No, that's not great.
Yeah. So the problem is, what if the person who sets that interest rate is the president? Well, a president might have this nasty thing of wanting to get reelected.
Yeah.
And a president might say to themselves, employment's a little bit low. Not enough people have jobs. I think we should lower interest rates, boost the economy. More people have jobs. People say, I'm really good. I'm doing my job so well. And then I get reelected.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good idea if by doing so, you're not going to spike inflation. You're not going to cause trouble with the economy more broadly. But of course, even if it is going to cause trouble with the economy more broadly, you're not going to see that trouble for like 6 months, a year down the road. So a president without scruples, a Richard Nixon, if you will, might very well say, you know what? I need the economy to be boosted so I can get reelected. So damn the consequences. We're dropping the interest rate. And of course, this is exactly what Richard Nixon did in 1970. The midterms were coming up. He wanted to make sure that the Republicans did well in them. So in order to make that happen, he basically ordered the head of the Federal Reserve, the guy he had put in power and the guy he had put in place, and who was just way too willing to do what Nixon said, basically Nixon ordered the interest rate to go down. This did lead to a boost in employment. And 6 months later, it led to a huge spike in inflation, up to, just the kind of rate that we saw under the worst of it under Biden. But of course, those high rates of inflation stayed in the economy for up until the 1978, 1979, basically. Like, it wasn't until Paul Volcker became head of the Fed and just wrenched the economy by jacking interest rates, throwing huge numbers of people out of work, that the inflation expectations were sort of tamed. The point of the story is, if you start messing around with this stuff for political reasons, it can cause huge economic damage that just takes a huge amount of pain and suffering to fix. You don't want this. And to give you a more recent example of a president forcing the central bank to lower interest rates for his political benefit, I give you the Republic of Turkey.
The Republic of Turkey, yes.
Yeah, aka Turkey, as they've changed the name to. The president of that country, Erdogan, basically was facing a situation where people were upset with how the economy was going. Employment was too low, unemployment was too high, and he was like, all right, well, we need to lower interest rates. Inflation was already really high in Turkey. But he forced it to happen anyway because he put his son-in-law in charge of the central bank. Yeah, it was a great system. So the end result is that, they just lowered the interest rate and lowered the interest rate and lowered the interest rate, and inflation went up to 80% per year. 80. It's just, my God. The only country I think that had worse inflation at the time was Argentina.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you know about Argentina, you know about Argentina. So, so it's a perfect example of and think about what that means for a second. If you have savings in 1 year, the value of those savings drops basically in half.
Yeah.
Which is not great. People generally don't like it when that happens. So you, in order to avoid situations like that, the whole idea was the Federal Reserve in the United States would be independent. Presidents would nominate people to go onto the board of the Federal Reserve. There would also be members of the board who are the heads of the local or sort of regional federal banks that exist.
Yeah.
And it would be on a rotating schedule. So no president could pack the board purely with their own supporters.
Right.
And every person who's on that board has a 14-year term.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. The whole point is, once you're in, you don't have to worry about getting reappointed. Any given president basically is not in a position to influence you too much. And so with the exception of Richard Nixon being able to absolutely subordinate the Federal Reserve and the economic fallout that caused, with the exception of the Federal Reserve has built a very strong reputation of political independence. And that has had a lot of really beneficial impacts for the United States.
Yeah. And thanks for that. So here's the issue, though. Here's the issue. The current president of the United States, one Donald John Trump, small hands, we don't know if he's alive or dead, has decided that he wants the Fed to work for him for the exact same reasons that Nixon wanted it, because he wants to be able to say, look at all the good things I'm doing with the economy by just messing around with the numbers, which is how the system is designed to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, literally the thing that the Fed exists to prevent.
So he's been threatening the chair of the Fed, Jerome Powell. Correct?
That's correct.
And Jerome Powell was appointed by this guy named Donald John Trump in his first term because
I think I heard of that guy. Yeah.
The second term of Donald Trump. So in the first term of Donald Trump, which he's forgotten about, he's trying to blame it on Biden, but it was appointed by Trump back when Trump had some guardrails in his in his cabinet and his administration. But that's not working. When you're on a 14-year term, it's very difficult to be intimidated by, a failed businessman with 34 felony counts from New York, right?
Yeah.
So he's tried. So Trump is now trying a new thing of trying to fire the only black woman on the board.
Funny,
but she can't do. That works. But he can't just fire her.
Well, that's the thing. The according to the laws on this, you can remove a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve for cause. And cause is a legal term. What it means is basically, blatant incompetence in office, blatant neglect of your duties, committing some kind of crime in office, connected with your office. These are things that count as for cause. And it's a very strict standard. Precisely because if cause could mean whatever the president says, then there is no insulation from politics in the first place. So one of the annoying things about the Supreme Court is that there were quite a few things that Congress had created, institutions created by Congress that had this standard that said that you are politically insulated from the executive, the head of the Consumer Protection Financial Protection Bureau, for example, was meant to be insulated in this fashion. And the Supreme Court has gutted that for everything, basically overturning this case called Humphrey's Executor for everything.
Which we talked about.
Except for the Federal Reserve, that Supreme Court case that basically said the president is God King when it comes to the bureaucracy, explicitly said, except for the Federal Reserve.
Duh.
And that's not enough for Trump. That's not enough for Trump. And you can't be God King unless you're God King of everything.
And the Supreme Court, as you know, the majority of the Supreme Court has been very, very helpful to Trump on everything but money. Every time he touches money, tariffs, they always say, hang on, wait a second. You can violate people's rights up to the very limit of that.
But you can throw people into torture prisons. That's absolutely fine. Give them, 36 hours notice and then do with them what you want. It's fine.
Sure.
But don't mess with the money.
Yeah. The only reason that you're in office is because we're going to make a gazillion dollars. So don't mess with the money. And so
here he is messing with the money.
So he's gone after a woman called Lisa Cook. Let me make sure that name is right.
That is her name, Lisa Cook.
Cook, and she's a governor of the Federal Reserve. That's what they're called, governors. Mm-hmm. And he's gone after her because of apparent mortgage fraud.
Now, this is interesting, Chris, because she is, I believe, at least the third person to have been accused of mortgage fraud by the Trump administration.
Yes.
And that's interesting because not a one of them has actually been charged with mortgage fraud.
That's right.
Which you might notice is a bit weird. If the government has evidence that you've committed a crime, and the government announces that it is evidence that you've committed a crime, but then it doesn't charge you with committing a crime, you might draw the inference that they had no evidence at all. They're just making it up.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, even if they did have evidence that she had committed mortgage fraud, this would have been well before she was appointed to be governor of the Federal Reserve, and therefore it could not possibly count as cause under the legal standard for being able to replace a governor of the Federal Reserve. Like, even if they had evidence of this, and it's clear that they don't. And also, what they have claimed is, aside from saying, fraud, we found fraud, the explicit thing they're saying is that she had a mortgage on a second property that she listed as, I think, her primary residence, when actually she had another mortgage that said she was a prior mortgage that said that was for her primary residence. But the thing is, primary residence is not the same thing as principal residence. And that's the thing that matters when it comes to, get to the establishing the crime of mortgage fraud. Like, the evidence that they're pointing out, or even the story they're pointing out without evidence, by itself doesn't actually satisfy the elements here. So they're making claims. The claims don't even stack up. Even if they did stack up, it would not matter. There is no there when it comes to whether or not Lisa Cook can be fired for cause. She simply can't, if law means anything at all. And now we wait for the Supreme Court to determine whether law means anything at all.
And this is where the big question is now with the Supreme Court, because as we've established, they protect money. Mm-hmm. So are they going to protect her? Are they going to protect the Fed? Because if they let the Fed go under Trump, they know that the economy will be tanked within a week, because he's going to fill it up with a bunch of nonsense Heritage Foundation lackeys who, we're still trying to look over that dude's dissertation, by the way. EJ Antoni. We're trying Antoni. One of the. Sorry,
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
But the whole point being is that this is the first half of basically trying to control the economy, which you would have seen in like Soviet states. And the second half, because we're running out of time a little bit here, but we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about it. So we'll keep an eye on this thing that's going on with the Fed, because Trump is absolutely laser focused on trying to control the Federal Reserve Bank. Personally control the Federal Reserve Bank.
Exactly.
That might be the only thing that I see him with any kind of clear focus on. The other thing is clearly from his fascist backing, which would be your Millers and the rest of them, who have been super, super, super excited to send in the National Guard into all different parts of America, only blue cities.
Yeah.
And he's now decided to mess with the great city of Chicago. So as people know,
what is it? The second or third, largest city in the United States, one of the most economically important cities in the United States as well. Chicago's big. Chicago's important. Messing with Chicago is a whole thing. But to be fair, they've already messed with LA and Washington, D.C. So, why not send in the troops?
Why not send in? So to put some background here, first, I was born just outside of Chicago. I grew up in and around Chicago up until I left for college. I even came back until I moved here to London. So I'm not saying that I was on the streets every day of Chicago, but I did live on State Street when I was a kid. And it's what's happening is the shortest version to put it to talk about it is this way. A few weeks ago, I think maybe last week, we talked about how Big Balls got carjacked, if you remember.
Yes,
Big Balls got carjacked, which is never fun, by I think two 15-year-old girls.
Yeah, he did get beaten up by two 15-year-old girls. Yes,
that's right, which is never fun. Not that I haven't beat up by two 15-year-old girls, but I'm assuming that it's not fun. And then Trump used that as an excuse to send in the National Guard to D.C. What have they been doing in the interim? Because they did go into D.C. because it is a federally controlled district by Congress.
Yep. So there's the National Guard of D.C. is directly responsible to the president. There's no mediating authority there. Like in California, theoretically, Gavin Newsom is in charge of the California National Guard, and there was a real legal issue of whether or not Trump could nationalize them without a good reason. Washington D.C., he could do it, no reason at all. It's absolutely fine.
And so the National Guard is put on the streets of D.C. And to bring down the dangerous crime levels, which are at a 30-year low.
Yes.
And basically, the guard is just kind of walking around, seemingly harassing people who are sitting on stoops of their houses, and homeless people, and also apparently picking up trash. It is running around the monuments picking up garbage.
Now, I know that sounds weird. Why would we be taking people who are in the National Guard, people who have day jobs, people who have families, people who give up their time to train and be ready for national emergencies to defend their country in case of invasion? Why would you take them out of their jobs and mobilize them and have them pick up trash? Well, I think I have an explanation for you, Chris.
Oh, hang on. All right, let's go.
Yeah. So now, obviously, Donald Trump says that the whole point of doing this is to bring down crime. But if you're going to do that, you would presumably put the troops in the areas where the crime exists, right?
That's correct, yes.
Right. But the thing is, they haven't done. What they have done is put the troops in places where crime is very, very, very rare, but where lots and lots of tourists are, and also where the media can easily take pictures of them.
Yeah.
Now, since they're in places where there isn't crime, like the National Mall, or indeed, the Lincoln Memorial, places like that, there's no crime to bust. So if they're there, you might as well use them to pick up trash.
And they're also lowering crime there. The crime there is now lower because they're there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what else is lower since they're there, Chris?
What's that?
Customer levels at local restaurants during what should be the busiest time of year for local restaurants. So local restaurants are basically screwed because of this. So
what I was going to say?
Death to restaurants, says Trump.
What I was going to say, what also is down in D.C., thanks to the National Guard being there, is bear attacks.
Oh, well, that's really good.
There have been zero bear attacks since the National Guard arrived, and therefore the National Guard prevents bear attacks in D.C., and that's why they need to be deployed to every blue city in America to stop the pandemic of bear attacks.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know if people are aware of this. There are bear attacks every single day in Chicago. The Chicago Bears are named after them. And they're not talking about the team. We're talking about actual bears just roaming the streets, going to Walgreens and shoplifting. And they go into banks and they take the money, these bears. But they don't do that in D.C. The bears don't do that in D.C. because the National Guard is there. Do you understand what I'm saying, people?
Thank God.
Thank God for the National Guard being in D.C. to stop the bear attacks.
And to pick up trash.
Pick up trash.
Very important.
So if you can tell, I have a few feelings about this. So Trump, which is definitely not an Epstein distraction. That's still on.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely not an Epstein distraction. He's now declaring that he's going to send, potentially by the end of the week, more immigration people to Chicago, and at some point, National Guardsmen to Chicago. And he's doing this because of the grand, dangerous nature of Chicago and everybody. Now, Chicago is a big city, just like any big city. There's going to be crime. There's going to be good parts. There's going to be bad parts. But I was just there in June. It is not a city where I was afraid to walk around both during the daytime and at nighttime. Now, I'm not saying I'd walk in every single part of Chicago at night, just like I wouldn't walk around in every single part of London at 3:00 in the morning.
Right. Yeah. It's that's the thing. This is the kind of thing you could only believe if you've never been to a city,
Which a lot of people haven't in America.
To be fair, that's a good point. But and to be fair, a large part of America seems to believe that all the cities burned down during the George Floyd protests
in 2020.
That there is no Minneapolis anymore. It was all burned to the ground. And
it's all a hologram. It's a hologram.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Everything is fake, and also only the lizard people know the truth.
Yes.
So it's absolutely perverse to me, this idea that because there are some areas of the city that are not safe because crime levels are high, usually because poverty is concentrated in those areas and police tend not to be very active in those areas. And, there are reasons why crime exists and ways to deal with crime. But the thing is, to then say, oh, well, therefore, every part of a city is dangerous.
And we need to send in troops. Now, again, the idea of sending in the National Guard into an American city that isn't currently under a serious state of unrest. Is
facing an emergency.
An emergency. If there was some kind of natural emergency, that's fine. I mean, obviously, you're going to need all help that you can get. But the thing that I really want to talk about when it comes to this plan, because it's obviously not just going to end with Chicago, it's going to be every blue city, is one, they're never going to send any troops to St. Louis. They're never going to send any troops to Miami. They're never going to send any troops to Austin, Texas. They're never going to send any troops to Arkansas or Louisiana, where murder rates are, I think 4 times as high in Louisiana than they are in any of these blue cities, right?
Yeah, Louisiana is kind of notorious for being one of the most dangerous states in the Union in terms of violent crime. What's really interesting is that in the American imagination, crime has never been higher, and New York is the most dangerous city in the world. And in reality, crime hasn't been this low since the 1970s.
Yeah.
And New York is one of the safest cities in America. Yeah. It's absolutely incredible to me. It's like we decided as a society that data doesn't matter. All that matters is vibes.
No, but that's true though. That's the truth. That vibes means more than information, because I can feel that the bears aren't attacking me. I can see that there are no bears attacking me. Therefore, the National Guard is keep me safe. Right. But the other half is this, and J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, because he basically said it the best, where he said, "This is about the 2026 election. This is about getting people used to seeing federal troops on the ground. This is about basically having an arm of Donald Trump in places where they can affect the outcome of an election." And Brandon Johnson, who is the mayor of Chicago as well, he passed this with the mayor's version of an executive order saying that if you're going to be a police officer doing any policing in Chicago, you can't wear a mask, because all of ICE wears masks to protect themselves as they're kidnapping people off the street.
Right, exactly. Because the last thing you want, if you're going to be kidnapping people off the street, is for the people who pay your salaries to know who you are, and therefore start asking questions.
Well, of course. Yeah. So we're sitting in this world now that I think the ultimate end game here, for people like Miller and the rest of them, is the ultimate fascist end game. You need to create the emergency, the Reichstag fire. You need to create the thing that allows us to cancel your rights for a temporary amount of time while we reestablish order.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So what they're hoping is that there's going to be a massive protest against the National Guard, just like they were hoping in Los Angeles. It just never happened.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to throw a sandwich at, a guardsman.
Assault with a deadly weapon, Chris.
Yeah. And then I honestly believe that the Trump administration wants either a guardsman or protesters to be killed.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's because if you don't get that, then you can't justify any of this, can you?
You can't justify taking over the city and the state.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's what they're looking for.
I mean, yeah, I do think just, one interesting thing that I think I wasn't expecting, and that I don't think the Trump administration was expecting either, is that the American criminal justice system is actually harder to hack than they would like. And I bring this up in this context because you mentioned the assault with the sandwich, the subway assaulter, who, so for those of you who remember a little bit ago, a guy confronted some ICE agents on the streets of Washington, D.C. This guy was, let us say, a little bit drunk. This guy also had a Subway sandwich he had just bought, and he, while remonstrating with a member of ICE, threw the sandwich at him and then legged it, and it was very, very funny. What wasn't so funny is that he was arrested and then charged with a felony for assaulting a police officer in his duties. He was also, interestingly enough, an employee of the Department of Justice.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he was actually an employee of the Department of Justice, right? Which possibly explains why he was so angry at seeing this massive violation of people's constitutional rights. It's probably not, if you are a lawyer, even if you are a drunk, even if you do have a Subway sandwich, and Lord knows there are better things to do with the Subway sandwich than to ingest it. But you probably shouldn't throw sandwiches at ICE agents, even if it is very, very funny. But so he gets fired. He is charged with charged with this
dangerous crime of assault upon a police officer or whatever it's called, using pickles and onions and potentially Southwest sauce.
So who knows what was in that Subway sandwich? Possibly bread that barely counts as bread. But so the reason why I bring it up is that in the United States criminal justice system, there's two ways to actually get someone indicted, to be able to bring a criminal case against them, right? Number one is to file what's called a criminal complaint, where you basically go to a judge and say, here are the facts, here's the reason why we think someone has committed a crime, here's our reasonable basis for suspicion, and then the judge can determine yes or no, either you've checked the boxes to be able to bring this case or you can't. The other way is through the use of a grand jury.
Oh, yes.
Now, a grand jury is much larger than a petty jury, which is what you would find in a crown court, for example, or in a
12-person jury.
Yeah, exactly right. This is more like 24 people. And the idea of a grand jury is that you go to the grand jury as the prosecutor. You say, here is the evidence we have that leads us to believe someone has committed a crime. The jury does not get to hear from the defendant. There is no cross-examination of witnesses. This is literally the prosecutor saying, here's what we've got, and we think this person's committed a crime. And if you think we're not being completely insane, you should vote to charge this person. And then there's an actual trial where evidence is brought forward and it is tested through cross-examination and defenses are laid out. And you have a chance to meet your accusers and to put forward your defenses. This is a very minimal check on state abuse of power, in other words.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration has failed that check repeatedly, including with the sandwich guy, because when Jeanine Pirro brought the sandwich case to the grand jury and said, we think he's committed the crime of, assaulting a police officer or a federal agent, the grand jury was like, nah.
It's a sandwich.
Yeah, just nah. No true bill. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The sandwich store. Do we know who the sandwich store was or is?
Oh, yeah, no. His name is known. I don't have it in front of me because I am
because we're flying.
It's a hack and a fraud. So
because we're flying we're flying without a net here. We're flying without a parachute. It just dawned on me. I just need to check on this person's name or figure out who they are. I wonder because if you think about what happened in the UK with Palestine Action. Right. Now, obviously, this breaking onto a military base is not throwing a sandwich. Right. But I'm wondering if they let him go because of the sandwich or let him go because of his work or let him go for other reasons.
Sean Dunn, by the way, is the name of the sandwich store, a former employee now of the Justice Department. But yeah, no, like and effectively what we're looking at here is kind of jury nullification. So like I think the grand jury would have been within its rights to say, look, we have evidence of a guy throwing a sandwich and then legging it. Does that count as assault? Technically, yes. Assault is unwanted. The putting someone in a position where they can reasonably apprehend that they're about to be like messed with physically, that you're about to commit a battery. right?
Yeah.
So you put the fear on someone. That is effectively what assault is, right? Here, though, it's the fear of getting hit with a sandwich, and if what you're trying to charge someone with is like, a felony where they're going to go to jail for years potentially,
for
where there could be exactly like I think the jury was well within its rights to look at that and say, this is overkill. This is absurd. What are you doing?
Which is again what we were talking about before. The system is a lot harder to hack. It's a lot harder to get around these massive firewalls because you have grand juries of people that you don't control. You don't know who those 24 people are going to be.
Exactly.
You've got to in order for this to work for the Trump administration, they can pull a Mussolini and just eliminate the judiciary and just have little committees of people that you appoint to decide judicial things. But again, the Constitution. So we're looking at a situation where, I mean, if these troops, I have no doubt that they're going to make their way to Chicago. But what are they going to do when they're there? Because this is not a federal district, and they're not supposed to be police. They're not supposed to be.
They, by law, cannot act as police.
That's right.
Except under very specific circumstances, and that's the Posse Comitatus Act, which goes back some time and used to be the kind of thing that right wingers in the United States were very, very interested in preserving.
And furthermore, we're running out of time. See, I think that this was supposed to happen over probably next summer, not this summer, because you don't.
Oh, I see.
In order to put this in place now, we're recording this on the 31st of August. Tomorrow it's September. Let's say that you send in the troops, by the middle of September. It's the end of summer. People aren't going to be wanting to protest in Chicago as it gets colder and colder and colder. It's just going to be people going to clubs and going to bars and going to people's houses and stuff. People are going to start going inside. What you need are people to come outside, and no one's going to be going outside in Chicago. Basically, you have until Halloween to cause a massive incident. As soon as you get past Halloween, the 31st of October, everyone's inside until like April.
I bet the National Guard troops are going to love policing
winter in Chicago.
That just sounds like a whole lot of fun to, have to not go to your work and not see your family for months at a time while you freeze your ass off in the streets of Chicago. That sounds like fun.
Doing what? Doing nothing. I mean, and you have to try to create.
Picking up trash, Chris. Picking up trash.
They're going
to clean up the streets of Chicago. Literally,
one can at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
But like they can help. God. They can help snowplow. I don't know what they're going to do, but basically, the fascists only have about 6 weeks to try to create an event. But as soon as that passes, you're now in Chicago winter, and that's brutal and it's cold, and people are just going to forget that they're even there, and who knows what they're going to try to do next. But I honestly think that this was supposed to happen next summer, just before the midterms.
Exactly.
And the only reason to launch this now is because of your friend and mine,
Mr. Jeffrey Epstein.
Mr. J. Epstein, deceased.
Friend is such a strong word.
Friend is a strong word.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Villain of the podcast. We'll call him villain of the podcast.
Yeah. I think he's a pretty good one. He's a pretty good villain to have. Just because what an evil man.
What a terrible human being.
And his best friend, Donald Trump.
And his best friend, Donald Trump. That's documented, that's real, that's recorded in his own words, in Epstein's own words.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, best friends for 15 years.
15 years.
During the height of Jeffrey Epstein's offenses. That's a fun fact.
Because enigmas never age or enigmas never die.
Which one was enigmas never age. Specifically age, Chris.
They never. That's right. Enigmas never
and they age. Have a little secret in common. Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
So, yeah.
So, I guess, we'll keep an eye on that. And and a bunch of other things that have been. There's always too much to talk about.
Of course,
every week, there's the shooting in Minnesota that we haven't been able to talk about.
Right, exactly.
We might talk about that later, or maybe we'll do a side note on that. I don't know, but we do need to recognize that we talk about just all the different random things that are happening in the UK. The Parliament comes back on Monday, the 1st of September, until conference recess.
Tomorrow. That's tomorrow. We are recording this on the last day of August.
That's right. Yeah. It's the end of summer for us. So not until the 21st. I know, Patrick. I know. But yeah, so we've had a good time, and we'll try to keep these regular, and hope Patrick, we didn't thank Patrick specifically because he's fighting a migraine right now.
Shucks. Now you're just making me blush. I've took preventative ibuprofen. It kicked in about half an hour ago. So now I feel right as rain, Chris.
Result. Yeah, okay. Exactly. So we've been waffling for far too long. So thank you for listening. And as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And we are doctors.
Not doctors.
Good night.